In yoga, we often talk about the eight-limbed path that leads towards enlightenment. Well, how can I, as a Christian, be so bought into this path? And what is it that I love about it? Well, in this video, I'd love to describe to you what is the eight-limbed path and give you reasons why I just think it's an awesome way to seek the divine. Now, there is a philosophical basis for these, and I'll link a video up there that you should watch first if you haven't. In that video, I'll talk about the basis of yogic philosophy, which really comes from a couple principles. The first one is that the world outside is not the world that we perceive and act in response to. Our world is actually constructed by our past experiences and the habits of mind that we've developed as a result of those past experiences. In this eight-limbed path, there are 8 things that we practice as yogis, and going along this path, it's kind of, we place them in a circle, but they're kind of almost also linear. Like, one side of the circle refers to the mundane things, the actual physical actions we can take, and the other side of the circle is meditative practices. It's things that happen in our mind, or really practices that we encourage within our mind that move us towards experiencing God. So just to lay them all out for you, the first 4 are the mundane practices, and they are the yamas and the niyamas, which are basically like guidelines for how to live well. I would say the yamas are the things to avoid. You could think of them as like the 7 deadly sins of yoga. And then the niyamas are the things not to avoid. They're the things we want to do every day. They're the practices of the yogi. And then we have asanas, the practice of poses. This is probably what you think of when you think of yoga class. And then pranayama, the practice of breath. And if you go to a yoga practice that's more hoo-ha and a little more spiritual, you've probably done some pranayama practices. So these are the 4 mundane practices within the 8-limbed path of yoga. The 4 that are less mundane, they're the practices of mind that lead us towards the divine. Notice we've gone from like living well to practicing poses every day to practicing breathing. The next one is withdrawal of the senses. It's the ability to shut out all of the inputs that our body is taking in all the time and just experience what's going on in our head without anything else going on in the world. So the 5th, withdrawal of the senses. The 6th limb is one-pointed focus. It's the ability to meditate until you can hold one object in your mind and get rid of everything else. It's like the traditional stereotype of the yogi who's just staring single-focused at the candle and nothing else in the world exists. They've entered one-pointed focus. But if you sit in one-pointed focus long enough, eventually it dissolves into zero-pointed focus. Zero-pointed focus is kind of where like you've meditated and put all your attention on one object, and eventually that object also just kind of melts away. And what's interesting is the experience you have when you get there. Most people talk about it as, I still exist, but there's no action, there's no thought, like nothing is going on in my world. Some people at that moment have this experience of just massive awareness, and it's all of a sudden their self kind of melts, and either it doesn't exist or their self is a part of all things that exist. And in that moment you enter samadhi, which is the last of the 8 limbs. It's enlightenment. It's the moment of union with God or union with the divine, whatever that looks like and means to you. Now, when we chase the divine lifestyle or chase interaction with the divine by following this 8-limbed path, we place them in a circle to represent the fact that even though they kind of go from mundane towards less mundane or more divine, that's true, but we kind of bounce around the circle in the way we go about things in our lives. So it's not really this linear path. It's a path of just enacting these 8 practices all the time and trying to live your life within these 8 practices. I have a couple last things that I think are really interesting and worth pointing out. And one is, what happens when you are living in this 8-limbed path and you're chasing experiences with the divine and it's just not happening for you? Well, the way we describe possible solutions in the West and the way someone in the East might describe your obstacles or the things that are blocking you could be very different. In the West, we're very action driven, and that's great. It means like if you are not experiencing the divine, if you're not moving up in the world, if you're not experiencing the things that you want to be, the first question we have is, what are your day-to-day actions? Like, are you actually doing asana and pranayama every day? Are you trying to withdraw the senses every day? Are you meditating? Like, if you're doing the actions, then you should be moving up and moving towards experiencing the divine. In the East, however, they might have additional questions. They might go to the first 2 limbs and say, well, are you living the right life? Or is your spirituality blocked because you're building up these habits of mind which are reinforcing yourself and your ego and holding you away from God? And I think it's well worth consideration that, like, what is your lifestyle like? And then once you have that lifestyle in place, Are you doing the daily practices? And if you are, I just perfectly believe that God will meet you where you're at. If this video is interesting, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button. And if you're interested in what does it mean to live by these practices of the yamas and niyamas and live a good life according to the yogic precepts of the 8-limbed path, I've got a video coming up. This is the Stoic Yogi, out.